Imagine stepping into a painting. Sunlight filtering through the leaves of ancient trees, the murmur of a flowing stream just beyond your thatched roof cottage.
Mm.
You're enveloped in the scent of wild herbs and freshly baked bread, wearing a comfortable flowing dress woven from natural fibers. Perhaps you're tending a small garden or meticulously stitching a delicate piece of embroidery.
It's a lovely image.
It really is. What comes to mind for you, our listener, when you hear the word cottagecore? For millions online, this isn't just some fleeting image. It's a profound, almost visceral feeling, an aesthetic that has truly, truly captured the imagination.
It's definitely more than just a visual style, isn't it? It's that whole sensory experience, just like you described. It draws people into this vision of simplicity and a deep, almost spiritual connection to nature, something that feels increasingly vital in our modern world.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into cottagecore, a movement that's been called an ode to simplicity, a return to nature, really highlighting those rustic aesthetics and, importantly, mindful living.
Yeah, mindful living is key.
So we're going to journey through its surprising, almost ancient origins, explore its, multifaceted appeal as this powerful escape from the relentless chaos of modern life. We'll uncover its vibrant yet often kind of paradoxical digital existence, and then really get into the nuanced discussions around its criticisms and also its incredible evolving potential for positive change.
And our sources for this deep dive are incredibly rich, thankfully, and really varied. It gives us a truly comprehensive view, I think. We've pulled insights from an environmental blog looking at its green side, delve deep into academic research on what scholars call digital pastoralism.
Digital pastoralism, that sounds interesting.
It is. It basically examines how we recreate these idealized rural lives online. And we've sifted through just a treasure trove of personal reflections from various Reddit discussions, offering those really firsthand accounts of its impact.
Real people's experiences.
Exactly. And we've also looked at cultural analyses from leading online magazines. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. Extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from all this rich material, giving you, our listener, a truly comprehensive understanding of this, fascinating phenomenon.
That paints a really clear picture. So, given that foundational understanding, let's drill down into the core of it. We've all seen the images, the floral dresses, the cozy cottages, baskets of foraged mushrooms, right?
The visuals are strong.
But what is the heartbeat of cottagecore? It's not just an aesthetic, is it? It's fundamentally about, what?
You're right. It definitely runs far deeper than just appearances. At its foundation, cottagecore is fundamentally about simplicity, a deliberate return to nature.
Simplicity and nature.
Yeah, and those rustic aesthetics, but all underpinned by a really strong emphasis on mindful living. It's almost like an act of rebellion against the dizzying speed of contemporary life.
A rebellion, interesting way to put it.
Well, yeah. Instead of endless scrolling or chasing the next big thing, it actively promotes engaging in, outdoor activities like gardening, baking, crafting.
You do it with your hands.
Things you do with your hands, exactly. And these aren't just hobbies. They're seen as deliberate acts. They're designed to foster a slower, more conscious lifestyle. It's really about appreciating the inherent beauty in the natural world, maybe striving for a degree of self-sufficiency, whether that's fully realized or just an aspiration.
Right, you don't have to go full-on homesteader necessarily.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And finding calm amidst what often feels like, the inescapable chaos of modernism. It literally reminds people of traditional values, perhaps, helping them savor the small but profoundly meaningful moments in life.
Which must help with stress.
Oh, hugely. It can lower stress and even encourage sustainable practices. It's not just about what you do, but really how you feel doing it. This mindful engagement, whether it's baking bread or tending a tiny window box garden, becomes this tangible counter-narrative to the kind of fleeting, disembodied experiences of modern digital life. It offers a grounded sense of presence that so many people find deeply therapeutic.
That mindful engagement really resonates. It sounds incredibly appealing, especially, like you said, in our hyper-connected, fast-paced world. So it's not just about looking good in a flowy dress, but about feeling good and perhaps even doing good for yourself, maybe the environment, too. It sounds like a whole holistic embrace.
Precisely. It's this charming marriage of deep nostalgia with practical functionality. It connects to an idealized era defined by tangible craftsmanship, an intimate relationship with nature, and just a pervasive sense of tranquility.
An idealized era, though, that's important.
Very important. It truly goes beyond just a visual style. It really encapsulates a holistic lifestyle that embraces handmade goods and simple living. People are actively seeking relief from the relentless pressures of modern life.
Hmm.
Cottagecore offers that serene mental setting, integrating those beautiful visual aesthetics with a purposeful movement toward mindfulness and intentionality. It's maybe about finding a sense of control in a world that often feels completely out of control.
And the escape aspect seems pretty central to this whole philosophy. I've heard it described as the core fantasy. What exactly are people trying to get away from? And what specifically are they hoping to find in this, idealized cottage in the woods?
It absolutely is the central pillar of the fantasy, yeah. The core fantasy of cottagecore is described quite simply, actually, as escaping to a cottage in the woods to live as if it were a simpler, less complicated time.
Simpler times, always appealing.
Always. And this desire to make things with one's own hands, whether it's bread, like we said, or a quilt, or tending a garden, it's framed as this profound form of self-sufficiency-based self-care.
Self-care, okay.
Yeah, it's a deep veneration of a pre-industrial way of life, sort of hearkening back to a time before mass production, before global supply chains complicated everything. And for many, this escape is specifically a desire to break free from the relentless cycle of capitalism with its constant demands for consumption and productivity.
Right. The pressure to always be buying, always be doing.
Exactly. And to disconnect from the pervasive, often overwhelming digital age that can feel incredibly draining. It's this deep yearning for a slower rhythm, a quiet space where you can actually hear your own thoughts, and a connection to something tangible and maybe enduring.
It's one thing to understand what cottagecore is, but how did this seemingly niche aesthetic suddenly just explode globally? Especially weirdly, during a time when everyone was stuck indoors. What were the hidden drivers there? Because that timing is really interesting.
No, the timing is absolutely crucial. You're right. Experts suggest that during periods of high stress, intense uncertainty, and, well, widespread upheaval like the pandemic, there's this deep, almost instinctual longing for simpler situations, simpler periods, or simpler ways of living. It seems to be a fundamental coping mechanism.
Makes sense.
Think back to the anxiety and uncertainty of recent years, the global lockdowns, widespread job losses, the looming specter of the climate crisis, the relentless spread of misinformation, economic turbulence. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, it was a lot. It is a lot.
It is. And all of these factors fueled a profound desire for comfort in what is perceived as nostalgic. People suddenly found themselves with all this unexpected spare time on their hands with nowhere to go, right?
Right.
And many endeavored to learn new skills and hobbies, often domestic in nature, that offered a sense of control and purpose when everything else felt chaotic. Baking sourdough, knitting, gardening, these activities became so widespread precisely because they provided that sense of tangible accomplishment and connection.
So it became this kind of domestic bubble, almost a temporary sanctuary, a personal space where all those external pressures felt, I don't know, momentarily muted, a place to maybe regain a sense of agency.
Exactly. Inside that self-created bubble, the crushing weight of societal pressures and the unsettling feelings of not being in control of one's own life just ceased to exist, even if only temporarily. As one commentator aptly put it, with a touch of dark humor perhaps, when the alternative is watching the end come, who wouldn't want to hide among the flowers?
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. It's a powerful testament to the human need for solace, for comfort, and for a reclaimed sense of control in the most turbulent of times. It's essentially a psychological retreat that offers a perceived antidote to overwhelming anxiety.
Okay, beyond the philosophy and the why now, let's talk about the look. Cottagecore is just so visually rich. If someone wanted to see cottagecore, what are the unmistakable visual cues? The key elements that truly define its aesthetic? What makes a space or an outfit unmistakably cottagecore?
Visually, it's instantly recognizable, isn't it? It's almost like a warm hug for your eyes. The foundational elements usually include things like blooming floral patterns, often reminiscent of, vintage wallpaper or maybe antique botanical illustrations.
Right, very detailed florals.
Very detailed, yeah. Paired with charming retro vintage decor. The color palettes are almost always soft and soothing, thick and muted pastels, earthy tones, creamy whites, all chosen to kind of key into the serenity of rustic living and cultivate this profound sense of peace in any space.
So calming colors.
Very calming. And there's a strategic, very deliberate use of natural and handmade materials.
Yeah.
Things like unpolished wood, soft cottons, airy linens, delicate lace. These aren't just decorative. They really reinforce cottagecore's commitment to warmth, authenticity, and that connection to the natural world.
It's about the feel as much as the look.
Absolutely. It's all about creating cozy, inviting spaces that cleverly blend that old world charm with maybe a subtle modern sensibility. You can fuse it into your own home by adding curated vintage furniture, perhaps undertaking DIY projects to upcycle old pieces, and definitely bringing in an abundance of indoor plants.
Ah, plants, of course.
Oh yeah, not just for air purification, but to directly connect with nature right there within your living space.
So it's not just about what you wear then, but how you meticulously craft your immediate environment to reflect these values. But speaking of what you wear, the fashion seems to play a pretty significant role. What are the characteristics of cottagecore fashion?
Oh, fashion is huge. It effortlessly marries comfort with this timeless, almost ethereal style. It's characterized by light as air cotton, delicate lace accents, soft wools, often in beautiful muted floral prints, and gentle pastel shades, like we mentioned for decor.
Soft and comfortable.
Very. Loose-fitting, flowy dresses and skirts are absolute staples, often with tiered layers or subtle embroidery. You see a lot of peasant blouses with those billowy sleeves or puffy sleeves that add a touch of romantic whimsy.
The puffy sleeves are very distinctive.
They really are, and practical yet charming linen aprons are also key elements. What's particularly fascinating here, I think, is how this whole sartorial choice inherently aligns with the sustainable fashion movement.
How so?
Well, cottagecore fashion strongly emphasizes thrift store shopping, sourcing quality, durable items, or ideally making one's own clothes. This is seen as a deliberate rally against fast fashion's ephemeral trends, those fleeting styles that disappear as quickly as they arrive.
Right, wear it once and it's out.
Exactly. Instead, it favors more timeless, artisanal, and ethically sourced sartorial choices. It truly speaks to the ethics at cottagecore's heart, embodying anti-consumerism through personal style.
And when you describe it, I can almost see those pictures again, the ones we looked at in our sources. The visuals really define it, don't they? They evoke such specific scenes.
They absolutely do. It's a deeply visual language that communicates instantly. Imagine like a rustic wooden table, maybe slightly worn, adorned with a stack of classic books, a vase overflowing with vibrant wildflowers freshly picked from a meadow, a woven basket spilling over with seasonal fruits, and maybe a quaint, mismatched teacup holding a steaming brew. It just paints a very specific, idyllic picture of domestic tranquility.
It really does.
Or envision those beautiful white chemise-like dresses made of light cotton or linen, gently swaying on a laundry line under a bright, sunny sky, framed by lush greenery and perhaps a hint of a distant rolling hill.
Yeah, the laundry line shot is classic.
It is. The aesthetic frequently features elements like an abundance of flowers, antique teapots and teacups, and that diaphanous, almost dreamlike clothing. These elements serve as both icons and the very roots of the style, instantly conveying the cottagecore ethos. Even historical textile designs, like William Morris's iconic tulip pattern, show a clear and enduring connection to these natural, bio-inspired motifs, demonstrating the aesthetic's deep lineage. It's just a deep visual language that evokes a sense of peace, authenticity, and a romanticized bygone era.
It's clear that cottagecore isn't just some fleeting trend of TikTok dances and pretty dresses. It feels like it taps into something much, much deeper, something historic and philosophical even. Let's dig into its roots. Where did this romanticized vision of rural life truly come from? Is it a modern invention or something much older?
You've absolutely hit on a crucial point there. The desire for a back-to-basics approach to life has roots far, far deeper than just recent trends. It extends all the way back to antiquity, actually.
Antiquity? Really?
Yeah. We see echoes in ancient Greece and Rome, for instance. Poets like Theocritus and Virgil, they were observing the complexities and what they saw as the moral decay of their empires, and they actively wrote about reverting to a pastoral, almost Arcadian way of living.
Huh. So thousands of years ago.
Exactly. Their idyllic verses about shepherds and nymphs living simply in harmony with nature, they speak to this timeless human longing, this yearning for a simpler, purer existence, away from the perceived corruption of urban or imperial life. It's just a recurring theme throughout human history and literature.
So it's almost a classical ideal, a universal human yearning, not just something whipped up online recently. And moving forward in time, what kind of more recent movements does it strongly echo?
More recently, it strongly echoes the Back to the Land movement, particularly the one in the early 20th century, which saw a really significant peak in the 1970s, especially in the U.S. and parts of Europe.
Right, the 70s Back to the Land. I've heard of that.
Yeah. This movement focused intensely on self-sufficiency, through growing one's own food, making things from scratch, building intentional communities. Think of initiatives like Great Britain's Dig for Victory campaign during wartime.
Ah, yes. Growing vegetables everywhere.
Exactly. It encouraged people to grow food in every available patch of land, not just for sustenance, but for national morale. Or recall that widespread exodus from cities to rural areas and communes in the 1960s and 70s, as people sought to escape urban alienation and create these alternative self-sustaining lifestyles. Cottagecore finds its essence in this romanticized vision of rural life, celebrated beautifully across various forms of literature and art, consistently drawing from the charm of idyllic simplicity and the peaceful pastoral scenes of bygone days.
What's particularly fascinating here, and almost comically ironic, is the connection, or maybe the facetious connection, some people draw to Marie Antoinette. She's sometimes jokingly crowned a cottagecore icon. How on earth does that fit into this narrative of simplicity when she was, well, Marie Antoinette?
It's quite the ironic parallel, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
But it offers a really insightful historical precedent, believe it or not. Marie Antoinette famously created her Hameau de la Reine, which was basically a replicated country village complete with dairy farms, cottages, orchards right outside the extreme opulence of Versailles.
Right, her little play farm.
Exactly. And here, she and her aristocratic guests would dress in these theatrical peasant outfits, simple cotton dresses, straw hats, and essentially play at being shepherds and milkmaids, luxuriating in this highly aestheticized rural simplicity. Her portrait by Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun in a simple muslin dress even caused a boom in demand for cotton among the aristocracy, moving away from the heavier silks and brocades.
So it became fashionable to look simple even for the queen.
Precisely. This highlights a historical dress-up aspect, where the elite would mimic a simpler life. And surprisingly, this resonates with some modern cottagecore practitioners who really enjoy the performative, aspirational aspect of the aesthetic, regardless of whether they can fully embody the lifestyle itself. The insight here, I think, is that this desire to construct a narrative of simplicity, even from positions of immense privilege, isn't new. The fantasy often serves as a lens, allowing us to project our anxieties about the present onto an idealized past.
Even if that past wasn't simple for most people.
Exactly. Regardless of whether that past was ever simple for anyone but the privileged few who could afford to play at it.
That's a great point about the enduring human desire for play-acting simplicity. And ideologically, there's a strong connection to some pretty profound philosophical movements, right? I'm thinking Jean-Jacques Rousseau and maybe the American Transcendentalists.
Absolutely. Ideologically, cottagecore has really significant commonalities with Jean-Jacques Rousseau's 18th century Romanticism. That was a philosophy that fundamentally championed the idea of returning to nature, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, too.
Okay.
Rousseau believed that human nature was at its purest when in harmony with the unspoiled natural world, uncorrupted by societal artifice. This ideal of unbridled nature in harmony with man is as much a part of cottagecore's appeal as its nostalgic yearning for escape.
And the Transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson.
Yes, many also see it as a modern revival of the American Transcendentalist movement of the 19th century. This movement, with iconic figures like Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, Louisa May Alcott, they emphasized nature's spirituality, advocating for a focus on immediate intuitive experience over just rote adherence to tradition or the past.
Right, living deliberately.
Exactly. They idealized nonconformity, simplicity, self-reliance, individualism, often retreating to nature for reflection. Thoreau, famously living simply at Walden Pond, is noted by some online commentators, kind of jokingly, as an OG cottagecore daddy for his embodiment of these ideals.
Huh, I like that.
And it's important to remember these figures weren't just nature lovers, they were also abolitionists, proto-feminists, political progressives. They embodied many of the values of self-reliance, ethical living, and social conscience that we see resonate within the more progressive factions of cottagecore today.
So it's not just a rejection of modernity, but it's a philosophical stance rooted deeply in history, with maybe a surprising progressive undertone. And William Morris, the 19th century textile designer, he also plays a crucial role here.
Yes, his influence is quite profound, actually. Further influences come directly from William Morris's 19th century neo-medievalism, which was a really powerful anti-industrial movement. Morris, a key figure in the arts and crafts movement, deeply criticized the dehumanizing effects of industrialization and mass production.
Right, the beauty of handmade things.
Exactly. He prioritized handmaking, craftsmanship, a return to the integrity of pre-industrial labor, all infused with these utopian philosophical perspectives about creating a better, more beautiful society. His designs, like the instantly recognizable tulip pattern we mentioned, were explicitly bio-inspired, using natural motifs as a direct rejection of industrial sterility.
They still look amazing today.
They do. And what's fascinating here is how Morris's philosophical and political perspective infused his designs with this utopian tone. He simultaneously looked back towards the past for inspiration, while also looking forward to a more equitable and beautiful future. This embodies a kind of presentless quality that we see vividly in cottagecore's nostalgia. It's a yearning for an invented, fluid historical moment, a feeling or an ideal rather than a specific fixed time. This liminal quality is especially prominent in cottagecore, which often seems nostalgic for a fluid rather than historically fixed past.
This incredible lineage, I mean, from ancient poets to Victorian reformers, it really shows the depth of this impulse. But this raises an important question that comes up a lot within the cottagecore community itself. Is it merely an aesthetic, a visual preference, or is it a fully committed lifestyle? There seems to be a healthy debate about that, a spectrum of engagement, maybe.
This is such a crucial distinction and a really active discussion point within the community. You're absolutely right. For some, its appeal is primarily found in the visual elements, in building mood boards, dressing up, enjoying what one Redditor affectionately called the cute shit.
Ah, the cute shit.
Yeah, the cottagecore merchandise, the delightful imagery, without necessarily immersing themselves fully in the demanding, often labor-intensive practices. For them, it's about the look, the aspirational dream, maybe a momentary dip into the fantasy. It's a form of visual self-care, perhaps.
But then for others, it's a much deeper commitment, right? A fundamental shift in how they actually live their lives.
Exactly. For a significant portion of practitioners, it's a profound, intentional shift towards greater self-sufficiency and a conscious move away from that trapped feeling you can get from a modern corporate path, or just the overwhelming demands of urban life.
Yeah.
Many see cottagecore activities like fermenting vegetables to make sauerkraut, diligently starting a garden from scratch, or learning to knit and mend clothing as profoundly fostering personal industry and a robust sense of self-reliance.
Personal industry, I like that term.
Me too. These activities are praised not just for their tangible environmental benefits like reducing waste, consuming locally, and their potential for saving money, but also critically for significantly improving mental health. They provide a healthy outlet for creativity, a tangible connection to the earth, and a sense of accomplishment that often feels missing from, say, digital work. As some describe it, it's a way to heal and to become human again by reconnecting with these innate human skills.
I've even heard it compared to the flower child movement of the 60s and 70s, suggesting there might be a hidden, almost subversive power beneath that gentle exterior.
Yes, some passionate advocates definitely draw strong parallels there. They view cottagecore as a friendly, approachable face for what they see as a strong, powerful movement behind genuinely simple ideals.
So more than just baking bread.
Potentially, yeah. This includes aspirations for, maybe, radical off-grid living, creating self-sustaining farms, fostering strong community power, and a fundamental stepping away from the corporate grime and consumerist culture. It suggests a deep-seated desire to truly heal and become humans again, in a fundamental sense, believing that a return to simpler ways of living offers a pathway out of modern malaise. It's seen by some as a profound, albeit gentle, act of defiance.
So what does this all mean for the individual then? Can cottagecore authentically be both an aesthetic and a lifestyle, or is one somehow more valid than the other?
Ultimately, the consensus within the community from what we've seen is that cottagecore can indeed be both an aesthetic and a lifestyle. And it's truly up to an individual to decide how deeply they want to engage.
Right, it's personal choice.
Exactly. Whether it's just enjoying the visual aesthetic, perhaps by curating a perfect Pinterest board, or watching calming crafting videos online, or actively integrating its ideals into daily life, for instance. Making dedicated screen-free time to bake a loaf of bread, embroider a pillowcase, or cultivate a small herb garden. Both forms of participation are considered valid. The beauty seems to lie in the individual choice, the freedom to define your own engagement. And that personal agency is really central to its widespread appeal. It's about meeting people where they are in their desire for calm and connection.
Okay, we've talked about the ideals, the history, the look. But let's get into a fascinating, almost irresistible contradiction right at the heart of cottagecore. Unlike past iterations of pastoralism, which genuinely sought to escape technology, cottagecore is uniquely reliant on the immediacy and, frankly, the pervasive nature of the internet and digital production. How did this movement, which romanticizes a pre-tech era, become so fundamentally digital at its core?
It's truly fascinating, isn't it? And yes, deeply ironic. The sheer digital manifestation of cottagecore is undeniable. Its meteoric rise in popularity coincided precisely with the global COVID-19 pandemic, directly leveraging social media platforms for astonishing, really unprecedented growth.
The numbers are wild.
They really are. Think about this. We saw cottagecore content on Tumblr increase by an incredible 153% just between March and April 2020, right as lockdowns are taking hold globally.
Wow, 153%.
Yeah. Pinterest searches for cottagecore fashion jumped an astonishing 80% from June 2019 to June 2020. And on TikTok, videos tagged with hashtag cottagecore just exploded from around 3.7 billion views in August 2020 to a staggering 6.6 billion by June 2021.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. The internet, far from being an antithesis, is actually what makes cottagecore distinct from earlier pastoral movements. It's very engine of propagation and connection.
That's incredible growth for something that, philosophically at least, is all about getting away from screens and cultivating a slower, more tangible life. And the self-categorization through hashtags seems like a key part of how it's defined and how it expands, doesn't it? It's almost like a collaborative definition process.
Yes, absolutely. The very definition of cottagecore is actively shaped and constantly evolving through content creators self-cataloging using these precise hashtags. It's user-driven. This has led to an expansive, fascinating web of related core aesthetics.
Ah, yes, the other cores.
Exactly. Like grandma-core, embracing vintage, cozy, grandmotherly hobbies, or fairy-core, which is a more whimsical, fantastical nature aesthetic. Then there's farm-core, focusing more on the agricultural work and rural living. And even goblin-core.
Goblin-core, what's that?
Goblin-core celebrates the messy, often overlooked beauty of nature. Things like moss, mushrooms, snails, mud. It's kind of the anti-aesthetic in a way.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. And this self-identification really showcases the elusive and ever-growing nature of cottagecore's parameters. It's constantly being defined and redefined by its diverse participants, allowing for endless subgenres and expressions.
So if you can't actually pack up your life and move to that cottage in the woods, the internet offers a kind of vicarious participation. It's a way to experience the fantasy without the full commitment, maybe.
Precisely. The significant online following, ironically, for a movement that at first glance seems to imitate a pre-tech era, allows for a really powerful voyeuristic aspect. For those who are unable to fully immerse themselves in the lifestyle, maybe due to financial constraints, geographical limitations, demanding jobs, whatever.
Right, real-life constraints.
Yeah, real life. They can still live out the fantasy vicariously through others' accounts. Digital engagement itself becomes this potent form of escapism, blurring the line between the virtual experience and what we typically consider real engagement. Because here's the insight. Viewing cottagecore crafting online, whether it's a video of someone baking bread or weaving basket, is often perceived and experienced by the viewer as a direct engagement with the craft itself.
Ah, so watching becomes doing, in a sense.
In a sense, yeah. It's a way to taste the fantasy, to dip your toes into the calm and beauty without committing to a full lifestyle change. And that makes it accessible to millions.
This raises an interesting point about crafting in the digital age. When we see these beautiful videos of people making things, is it more about the process of creation than the actual finished product when it comes to online cottagecore?
That's a really keen observation, and it's definitely a significant shift we see online. While platforms like Instagram and Pinterest primarily feature those curated still images where the finished craft object contributes to the overall aesthetic mood.
The perfect shot.
The perfect shot, exactly. TikTok, with its short-form video capabilities, absolutely excels at demonstrating the process of handmaking. You'll see these mesmerizing videos of people, say, foraging violets in a field to make a vibrant syrup, or meticulously weaving fresh lavender into wreaths, or engaging in intricate lace making, stitch by stitch.
You see the steps involved.
You see the steps. These videos highlight the journey, the activity of creating, rather than just the destination, the finished object. It's kind of like watching a chef on TV meticulously preparing a dish. Sometimes the journey of creating it, the rhythm of the chopping, the blending of flavors, is almost more satisfying to watch than the final plated meal. That's the process over product idea taking hold in cottagecore's digital space.
So it's not just a pretty picture of a finished product, but you get to see how it's made, which is incredibly engaging. But doesn't that mean the tangible experience of the object itself is often lost, replaced by a digital one?
Exactly. That's the trade-off. These digital videos create this illusion of proximity, of being right there in the moment of crafting, yet the actual tangible experience of the craft object itself, its texture, its weight, its scent, is often lost in the screen translation. The process of making sometimes becomes more important, more central, than the actual finished product. This even echoes historical craft philosophies, like the work of M.C. Richards, a 20th century artist and educator, a key figure in the American craft movement. She famously argued that the process of creation, the engagement of the maker's hand and mind, was often more profoundly transformative and significant than the finished object itself. And you see that reflected online in some TikToks, for instance. The finished product is never even explicitly revealed, further emphasizing the process as the subject of fascination.
That's a fascinating shift in engagement. You're not physically touching the materials, but your hand is still engaged with your smartphone, scrolling and tapping.
It is a profound shift in the tactile relationship.
Yeah.
Well, the direct physical relationship with natural materials is replaced by the physical presence of a smartphone. The viewer's hand is still engaged, like you say. The visual experience on screen corresponds to the tactile, albeit artificially close, via the screen's immersive qualities.
Artificially close, that's a good way to put it.
And this transformation of what might be an extended, time-consuming crafting activity into these bite-sized, digestible, one-minute TikToks offers incredible flexibility and accessibility. It truly allows for vicarious crafting that fits into anyone's busy schedule, removing the barrier of significant time commitment that physical crafting often demands.
And this digital engagement, this vicarious crafting, it can become a powerful feedback loop, can it? Like a viral loop of creation. It seems like the internet not only hosts cottagecore, but actively expands it.
Precisely. This is where the magic, or perhaps the paradox, truly happens. If a participant, inspired by these compelling online process videos, then documents their own crafting, whether it's the process itself or the beautifully finished product, and shares it back into the digital ether.
Completing the circle.
Right. A circuit of engagement is completed. This allows cottagecore to become viral in a literal sense, not just as pervasive aesthetic material that spreads quickly, but as a mode of contagious engagement. This hyperconnectivity fosters widespread activity, where people are not just passively observing, but are actively inspired to create, to share their own journey, perpetuating the aesthetics growth and evolution online. It's a collective fantasy of isolation, ironically and powerfully facilitated by global digital connection.
Okay, for all its charm, its historical depth, and its widespread appeal, cottagecore isn't without its critiques. And it's important we confront these shadows, especially concerning issues of exclusivity, historical erasure, and economic privilege. What are the main points of criticism here?
That's a crucial discussion to have, definitely. And the community itself grapples with these points quite openly. One of the most significant criticisms cottagecore faces is its strong association with a romanticized, often idealized, Western agricultural lifestyle.
Right.
And this has historically led to a noticeable lack of diversity and adherence to a predominantly white, often cisgendered, heteronormative image. The aesthetic is accused of being Eurocentric, often not promoting creators of color, queer individuals, or those with disabilities with the same fervor or visibility as white, cisgendered, heterosexual content.
So, representation issues.
Big representation issues. And these critiques point to a broader issue on social media where certain body types and identities are just disproportionately prioritized, often unconsciously.
And it goes deeper than just representation, doesn't it? There's a fundamental critique regarding the very land this idealized rural living is built upon, particularly in places like the U.S. and Canada.
Absolutely. This is critical. Cottagecore's foundation on idealized rural living in settler colonial nations like the U.S. and Canada can, somewhat ironically, negate its claims of being non-capitalist or self-reliant. This romanticization often overlooks or sometimes actively erases its basis on stolen indigenous land.
That's a heavy point.
It is. The very concept of homesteading, which is a popular aspiration within cottagecore circles, is intrinsically tied to the 19th century U.S. Homestead Act. Now, this act, while offering land to settlers, explicitly led to the violent displacement of indigenous communities, promoted unsustainable monoculture farming methods, and systematically divided up native land for private ownership.
So the history is fraught.
Extremely fraught.
Yeah.
And it raises the fundamental and uncomfortable question, as one of our sources so pointedly asks, whose land does this really belong to? It challenges the very notion of self-sufficiency on historically appropriated land.
It's a stark reminder that the past wasn't always as idyllic as it's often portrayed in these nostalgic aesthetics. And beyond the land, there's also a critique that it significantly simplifies the actual labor involved in farming and rural life.
Yes, very much so. The aesthetic is often criticized for simplifying agricultural work, portraying it as just a mere aesthetic pursuit, a gentle, sun-dappled activity, rather than depicting the intensive, often backbreaking labor, the deep knowledge, and the sheer dedication that actual farmers and rural dwellers endure day in and day out.
It's not just picking flowers.
It's definitely not just picking flowers. It can present a sanitized, decorative, almost performative version of a very demanding, physically taxing, and often economically precarious way of life. It risks overlooking the real struggles faced by those who genuinely work the land.
And what about the tradwife issue? That seems to be a significant concern that the community actively works to distance itself from.
That's a very serious concern that has emerged, yes. And one that the progressive elements of the cottagecore community actively condemn and try to counter. Because cottagecore is founded on an older, romanticized Eurocentric lifestyle, some fans have unfortunately misinterpreted its core tenets. They've conflated the return to traditional activities like baking and crafting with the promotion of traditional values and beliefs. This includes, worryingly, anti-feminist gender norms and the tradwife ideology, which advocates for women to adhere strictly to patriarchal domestic roles.
Which is not what most people in the community seem to want.
Not at all. This is something many in the legitimate cottagecore community actively avoid and condemn. They strive instead for a more inclusive, progressive, and empowering interpretation of domesticity. There's a real and constant concern that the aesthetic risks losing its authenticity and being co-opted by commercial interests, or worse, these problematic misinterpretations if they aren't continuously addressed and challenged.
Beyond historical and social issues, there are also strong classism and commercialization concerns. It seems like the very escape it offers might, ironically, be a luxury not everyone can afford.
That's a very valid and critical point. Cottagecore is definitely criticized for its limited accessibility, particularly to those who are short on time or money. Think about it. The ability to choose personal pleasure over monetary gain, or to work from home with a secure, livable salary, something especially highlighted during the pandemic, reveals a clear class distinction.
Right. The luxury of time.
Exactly. To be able to spend hours baking sourdough, tending a sprawling garden, or meticulously hand-stitching clothing demands significant leisure time. Time even, or perhaps especially during a global crisis, remains an immense luxury. This romanticized pre-industrial life, while appealing, demands substantial time, land, and resources that just aren't universally available. For many essential workers or those facing job insecurity, that simple life was a privilege far out of reach, making the aesthetic feel more like a fantasy than a potential reality.
So while the dreamy cottagecore media might be crafted for, say, an urban audience, the actual ability to live out the full fantasy requires a certain level of financial stability and privilege.
Precisely. Much of the cottagecore-inspired media and products are indeed crafted for and consumed by an urban audience, often from suburban backgrounds, who are drawn to the fantasy. But the practical idea of uprooting oneself to a rural farm or a charming cottage, buying land, maintaining it, that requires significant financial stability and inherent privilege.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Not at all. This reinforces the idea, as some critics put it rather bluntly, that it's a fantasy only accessible to wealthy white kids that want to play dress-up. It's kind of reminiscent of Marie Antoinette's play acting at Being a Shepherdess, where the illusion of a simple life masks the challenging work and profound financial investment involved in actual rural living.
And then there's the ultimate paradox, one that seems almost absurd: fast fashion exploiting an aesthetic that fundamentally champions sustainability and anti-consumerism.
This is a huge and stark critique, exposing the deep commercial tension within cottagecore. Fast fashion retailers, always quick to capitalize on trends, brazenly exploit the cottagecore aesthetic by mass-producing cheap polyester clothing that just superficially mimics the style.
Plastic dresses pretending to be cotton.
Pretty much. And this directly contradicts the cottagecore community's core tenets of sustainability, resourcefulness, ethical consumption. The irony is profound and, frankly, painful. An industry that is incredibly detrimental to the natural environment with its massive waste, pollution, exploitative labor practices profits directly from an aesthetic that promotes slow living, natural materials, and anti-consumerism.
It's deeply ironic.
It really is. It highlights the constant tension between authentic, value-driven movements and the insatiable appetite of commercial interests, threatening to dilute the very essence of what cottagecore stands for.
It's clear cottagecore faces some really complex challenges and contradictions. So what about its social impact? Is it purely escapist and maybe impotent as a rebellion against systemic issues, as some critics suggest? Or does it hold a real potential for positive change and activism? This seems to be another point of tension.
This is a really deeply nuanced debate within the community itself. In its purest, most isolated form, cottagecore is indeed seen by some as a purely escapist retreat from pressing societal ills, things like systemic capitalism, pervasive homophobia, deep-seated misogyny, entrenched racism.
Just hiding among the flowers, like that quote.
Exactly. From this perspective, it's largely about individual self-care and self-maintenance, a personal balm, rather than a direct call to action for broader societal change. Those holding this view argue it is rather impotent as a rebellion against these oppressive systems.
Right.
There's a palpable tension here between cottagecore's perceived individualism, that romantic fantasy of moving to the woods away from all other people to find peace, and the world's desperate, urgent need for collectivism and unified action to solve these large-scale interconnected problems. If everyone just retreats, who's left to fight the battles?
That makes sense. It highlights the difference between personal coping and collective transformation. But many in the community hold a more optimistic view, right? Believing it has strong potential for positive social impact and community building. How do they see it moving beyond personal escape?
Yes, many in the community truly believe it has a powerful, maybe untapped potential for positive social impact and fostering genuine connection. They argue that it can bring people together on a more personal, localized level, fostering genuine community through shared activities like baking, crafting, gardening, real-world interactions that build bonds.
Getting people together offline.
Exactly. It's seen as a way to pass on good fortune to others and to be against societal ideals and harmful systems, not against people. Some passionate advocates are actively pushing for cottagecore to become a vehicle for concrete action, to actively fight climate change by promoting sustainable practices, to open community gardens in urban areas, to teach practical self-sufficiency skills to broader audiences, and to champion the move towards green energy solutions.
So using the skills for good.
Right. It offers a tangible means for people to seize their agency and taking back means of production from big corporations, fostering a sense of empowerment in everyday acts. It also finds a burgeoning connection under the larger, more explicitly activist umbrella of solarpunk.
Solarpunk?
Yeah, solarpunk envisions a sustainable, equitable future through technological and social innovation. It hints at a more overtly activist future for cottagecore principles, moving beyond nostalgia into proactive future building.
So it's not simply an either purely individualistic or purely activist, but rather a dynamic spectrum of engagement, some of which leans very strongly into collective action and social change.
Exactly. And the community itself seems to be actively pushing for that potential to be realized, moving beyond just personal escape to collective action and a broader vision for a better world. The soft aesthetic might mask a surprising capacity for radical thought and action.
This leads us perfectly into discussing the evolving face of cottagecore. Because despite those initial criticisms of being largely white and cisgendered, it seems significant strides are being made towards diversifying the community and providing safe, welcoming spaces for marginalized individuals, aren't they? It feels like it's actively trying to address its past shortcomings.
Yes. What's truly encouraging, and I think a testament to the community's evolving values, is that cottagecore is increasingly favored and proliferated by young queer people and people of color. This vibrant embrace allows them to imagine and actively create a reality for themselves, free from judgment, harassment, or the systemic oppressions they might face in mainstream society.
Creating their own space within it.
Exactly. For some queer individuals in particular, it's a powerful act of reclaiming traditional domestic activities in rural spaces from what has often been seen as cis and heteronormative coding, meaning these spaces and activities were traditionally perceived as exclusively belonging to or defined by straight and cisgender people. By adopting and adapting cottagecore, they can be visibly queer in environments that might traditionally feel unwelcoming or unsafe, transforming them into spaces of acceptance and joy.
That's a really important act of reclamation and self-definition. And for many, particularly women and femi-identifying individuals, it seems to be a powerful way to redefine femininity outside of societal expectations, and especially outside of the traditional male gaze.
This is such a crucial aspect that came up repeatedly in our sources, especially in those deeply personal Reddit discussions we looked at. Many participants, particularly women and femi-identifying non-binary individuals, find cottagecore a profoundly empowering way to reclaim and redefine femininity entirely on their own terms.
How does that work?
Well, it encourages healthy, traditional feminine activities like crafts and homemaking. But crucially, it does so by stripping it of the rigid gender roles and sexism that historically confined women to these roles. This allows them to feel soft, delicate, gentle femme in a more gender non-specific way, moving beyond the binary.
Interesting.
One Redditor humorously called it a "fuck your expectations, have a cookie" style.
Ha.
Right? It's a comfortable, soft look that communicates valuing comfort, nurture, simplicity, and practicality. And maybe even provides a low-key tactic to look soft and sweet so that you're underestimated.
Using softness strategically.
Perhaps. This signals a significant cultural shift where it's increasingly okay to be a feminist now, as a cottagecore feels like this thoroughly feminine thing that doesn't have anything to do with men and is almost strictly for the female gaze, if anything, celebrating self-defined beauty and comfort.
That's a powerful statement about agency, comfort, and self-definition, all wrapped up in a seemingly gentle aesthetic. So how do community leaders, or just influential voices, balance the undeniable escapist allure of cottagecore with the urgent need for activism and confronting injustice in the real world? It seems like a bit of a tightrope walk.
It is indeed a delicate balance, but community leaders are actively articulating how to navigate it. They emphasize that the escapist allure of cottagecore can legitimately be considered a form of self-care, a vital respite. As one insightful commentator put it, it doesn't mean that you're turning your back on an unjust reality or claiming that there isn't more work to be done.
You can have both.
Exactly. They advocate for a holistic approach. You can protest, march, educate, and fight for justice, and simultaneously find joy and solace in these gentle, creative practices. These acts of self-care are not seen as a retreat from responsibility, but as a necessary act of recharging one's spirit to continue the fight.
Replenishing your energy.
Precisely. And you see practical initiatives supporting this, like dedicated Instagram pages promoting Black cottagecore creators or queer cottagecore. They're actively building diverse representation and fostering an inclusive community, consciously working to make the space more reflective of a global ideal rather than just a narrow Eurocentric one. It proves that authenticity and inclusivity can coexist.
So, looking to the horizon, what does the future hold for cottagecore? Is it here to stay, or will it eventually fade like other trends that once captured our collective attention? Does it have real, lasting power, do you think?
It's a good question. As society continues to evolve, facing new challenges and adapting to changing realities, so too will the cottagecore aesthetic, I suspect. Its inherent adaptability suggests it's likely to intersect with other emerging lifestyles, things like extreme minimalism, deep eco-consciousness, maybe communal living movements.
Emerging with other ideas.
Yeah, forming fascinating hybrid expressions that are both true to its core values and adaptable to changing times. Think about concepts like commune cottagecore, where self-sufficiency is sought collectively, or urban farms that bring these ideals right into the heart of cities, ideas that are already being discussed and explored online.
Right.
Its enduring charm, after all, lies in its fundamental core values: warmth, comfort, authenticity, and that nostalgic retreat from chaos. This inherent human longing promises longevity beyond just passing trends, I believe. It reflects a deep, perhaps primal human desire for simplicity, for tangible connection, and for a sense of peace and connection with nature's order in a constantly changing, often overwhelming world.
In the paradox of its digital nature, fostering community in a fantasy of isolation, that seems to be a key to its persistence, its continued relevance, maybe.
Absolutely, I think that's key. While the core fantasy is often one of solitude, of retreating to a secluded haven, the digital nature of cottagecore paradoxically fosters profound community building. The internet allows what would otherwise be a deeply individual escape to become collectivized, even when individuals are physically isolated.
Like during the pandemic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The unique circumstances of the pandemic, by forcing unprecedented global seclusion, inadvertently created this shared experience that amplified the universal need for this sense of escape and connection. It actively reframed isolation as a potentially empowering and even shared experience. This collective longing, fueled and amplified by hyper-digital connectivity, ensures its ongoing evolution and deep relevance in our interconnected yet often isolating world.
Wow. We've certainly journeyed through the enchanting world of cottagecore today. We've explored its ancient origins and romanticized rurality and profound philosophical thought, really understood its deep, almost psychological appeal as a source of comfort and escape in turbulent times, and examined its unique, often contradictory digital life.
And we've also, importantly, confronted its criticisms from issues of exclusivity and class privilege to its sometimes ironic commercialization, while also celebrating its immense potential as a vehicle for authentic self-expression, real community building, and maybe even progressive social change.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day? As a phenomenon that simultaneously embraces cutting-edge technology to promote an anti-technology ideal, fosters global communities through a fantasy of isolation, and empowers individuals while grappling with profound systemic issues like inequality and environmental degradation. Cottagecore is a truly fascinating living paradox.
Yeah, it really is. What does its enduring and indeed growing popularity reveal about our collective evolving desires? Our desires for authenticity, for connection, and for a deeper, more grounded sense of self in a world that relentlessly pulls us in 1,000 different, often superficial directions. It certainly gives you something profound to mull over long after this deep dive is complete.